This is Blake Temez with the Blake Temez podcast, where I speak as a Catholic layman to Catholic laymen about missional living, wisdom cultivation, and legacy building in service of Christ and his bride, the Church. Thanks for being here. I spent some time recently following up on a lead that I identified in an Aaron Wrenn article about masculinity and influencers within the masculinity space, and how the church has an opportunity to learn from some of these different influencers without granting legitimacy to every single aspect of their image and their message. And one such person who is really interesting in a number of ways is a man named Jack Donovan, who I would categorize within the realm of a Neo-Pagan Masculinity influencer. I do want to be careful of not, speaking outside of my realm of knowledge, right? So when I say Neo-Pagan, I want to hold that term loosely. I think in some of Jack Donovan's materials himself, he refers to himself as post-Christian and post-Pagan. So there's some labeling questions here. But I think that Neo-Pagan is fitting because a lot of his brand and his project as a whole is related to capturing masculine archetypes that originate in pre-Christian culture and recasting them into modern forms. And he's pretty overt about this, creating a new religion based in those masculine ideals that come from a pre-Christian, and you could say even pre-modern time period. To be more specific, he talks about developing a solar religion, a solar philosophy, one oriented towards the sun and all that the sun symbolizes, and making an emphasis on the different masculine archetypes of the father. Another one that he calls the striker, which, as far as I gathered, is kind of like a soldier of the father who carries out the father's will, and the Lord of the Earth, which is kind of like a earthy Dionysian, but yet not disordered type of harvest god. Okay, so he's playing with archetypes and pre-Christian religion and trying to have this syncretistic mix, right? Bringing things together in a way that is going to appeal to men so that he can form them into a tribe and set about on a civilization building project, And there's a lot to affirm there. He wouldn't gain an audience. He wouldn't have people interested in what he's doing if he wasn't striking some kind of chord. I will mention that if you look more into his work, he draws criticism because of his association with far-right or alt-right movements, and either being loosely affiliated or members of alt-right movements promoting his work. And so there's going to be obvious problems there when it comes to questions of culture war and how that's playing out. But all that aside for a moment, it pays for the church to take notice of successful people and movements in this space because they form really a kind of competition. And insofar as they are post-Christian or neo-pagan, there's a cosmic dimension, like a worldview level, salvation level type of concern here, right? When men like Jack Donovan are piecing together these new religions that purport to answer questions that Christianity has failed to, especially when it comes to questions of male vocation and masculine potential and realizing that potential. And so when we see these neo-pagan masculinities developing, we should see it as a opportunity for evangelization, for missionary activity, and be encouraged even more or impelled even more to take this masculinity crisis and how it interacts with the life of the church more seriously, because people outside of the church are responding to it and responding to it in fairly effective ways, right? And so insofar as their approaches are successful, the church is going to lose men, not just to kind of vague disbelief in general, but sometimes to entirely new belief systems that have dimensions that are incompatible with the gospel. Jack Donovan's in particular, he has deviant views in regards to sexuality, and that's one sticking point where there's going to be a divergence between traditional Christian belief and what he's attempting with his solar religion. And so there could be other men identified in this space. I do believe that there will just be more and more of this type of thing, this type of movement as time goes on, as traditional religious structures continue to break down over time. There will be more opportunities for people like Jack Donovan to fill a void in a vacuum that is left by a church that is receding in some areas. And so we want to consider how we can not just be reactive, but be proactive in this environment and see them as apostolic opportunities to, get in there, figure out what answers are inherent in our tradition, inherent in the gospel, and bring those to the fore and bring them to fullness of expression, in a way that speaks to these desires for a masculine ideal that men like Jack Donovan are trying to approach. And so just something to be aware of, just like my encouragement to, take a foray into red pill content on YouTube or on Reddit, not as a means of adopting every single viewpoint, but just to be aware of what many young men are turning to and finding appealing, doing something similar with neo-pagan influencers like Jack Donovan, again, to kind of come to terms with, okay, this is what the situation is right now, and kind of size up the competition basically, and recognize, okay, there's some commonalities here, some room for call it affirmation, right, of the positive aspects, but then also truly problematic aspects that they call for, a proactive Christian response to that. So, as always, thank you for your time and your attention, and God bless. If you're a young Catholic man or a mentor, missionary, or minister who works with them, or even just a concerned figure in their life, a parent, uncle, whoever it might be on the lookout for the release of a short guide that I'm putting together called Brothers by Blood: How to Forge a New Path for Catholic Manhood. In it, I'll expand on some of the topics in this podcast and give you some points of reflection to see about how you can be a part of a movement that empowers men and brings them to their full potential for their sake and also for the benefit of the church and, by extension, the benefit of all society. So, again, thank you for being a part of this, and look out for more information about the release of my guide in episodes to come.